Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Everyday Heroes podcast. Today, we have someone who has not only had a huge impact on my family, but has really made so many connections in how we show up in life, how I could have done things better, easier, made things so much easier. Oh, hang on. Oh, this has happened to me before. Hang on. This is what happens when you're dealing with technology. Hang on.
What's
There we
happening?
go. There we go. Let's start again.
Start again. All right.
See, the joys of being on live, Rob. That's what it's all about.
What happened?
What I want you guys to know is that Rob has really changed lives. He's the person that has introduced me to things that I never knew was even possible. And I have seen amazing impacts for that, through my life, through what's happened with me, but also through my family. So, Rob, thank you so much for coming.
Of course, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. This is very exciting.
It is. Okay, so in clinic, when I come to the clinic and have a chat with you guys, you're always so personable. I feel like, and I always say this to people when I'm recommending you to people, no question is a dumb question when it comes to Rob. Like, I've never felt that you've ever rushed me out of the room. You've always given me the time. You've never made me think, oh God, I was such an idiot for asking that. All of those things play such a big role when you are raising an autistic child. How did you even come to that point? Like what happened in your life that made you so personable?
I don't know. I just feel, there's no such thing as a dumb question. I think often there's dumb answers, and, being impatient and stuff like that. But I think the biggest important thing with patient care is you have things that you might not have understood or you can't wrap your head around. So you have a question to clear it up. And then once we back and forth a few times going, what are you confused about, or what's so hard about it? Because I always go, this is actually really easy to do. Once you get your head around it, it's fine. So you throw in as many questions as you can at the start, and all of a sudden everyone goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can do this. It's not a problem. Because as you know now, none of the changes are difficult. It's about having a few steps to do it, a reason why, understanding why it's important, and then you just do it and it's done, and we make the change we want, and then we show you how to look after it. But I think it's important that you understand, because a lot of stuff we do is very much health based. So what tends to happen is, actually, I say this a lot too, a lot of things with health is a little bit like, training for something, when you achieve your goal, let's say it's a weight goal, or I can now run 20 Ks or lift a certain amount, you don't get to keep that if you stop training, it goes away. So understanding your health and why we do things, you can then look after it long term without constantly, needing to come back and get things checked or recorrected because you forgot to do the sugar stuff again, or didn't know what the herb was for. It's like how you do it sometimes. It's like, oh, I'll just take this for this and that helps that. And if I need more help, I'll ask, and it's like learning how to look after yourself a little bit.
I remember when you first explained to me about the carbohydrate test, which we will get into.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, there's no way, impossible. I don't understand what you're talking about. You're talking about another language. And then once I'd mastered it, it's really become a way of life, if I'm being completely honest. It's something that we rely on every single day. It's how I live my life, how I, cook in the kitchen, and how I support my family the best way that it's possible. And I really want listeners to know what the carbohydrate test is. So we can definitely go into it now or a bit later. But
sure,
that was life-changing for us. Understanding what that meant to be able to look at blood sugar levels, and because we're not trained kinesiologists, we're barely keeping our heads above water, Rob. We're trying our best to raise our babies the best way that we know how. We didn't get a degree in this sort of stuff, and so we're like, okay, this is overwhelming. I'm not sure. I'm scared I'm going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
But I think that has really played a role in how. Even my husband at the beginning was a bit like, really, we're really going to do this. And then once he saw the changes, he was like, shut the front door. Like, he's gotten to the point, Rob, where you're going to love it. He will go to the grocery store and look at the back of the packets. And he said to me, Nat, did you know that butter has coloring in it? And I was like, no. And he's like, yes, it's got coloring. So we've now found one that doesn't have coloring in it.
Wow.
And it's crazy how much you have rubbed off on me, which has meant that it's rubbed off on him. So thank you for that.
No, you're very right. It's always good when, you know, someone that's like someone that kind of looks at it on the outside and goes, oh, I don't know, and they see the change, like, oh wow. It's always like, it's more exciting when that happens too.
It's so cool because it's something tangible that you can actually witness. It's not like, oh, if we do this for like, 3 years, maybe we'll get some results and stuff. Like and I think that's where it becomes hard, because as parents, we sort of want to see things sort of like, let's go. So the carbohydrate test was something I could measure and I could see how it was going to work. And by putting that in place, we were able to see changes. But we'll come back to that in a second. So obviously, with your work, you have chiropractics, applied kinesiology, and functional neurology. Now,
Yep.
that's a lot of words, right? So for people who maybe aren't aware, because I try to explain what kinesiology is, Rob, and I get a lot of it's a lot of muscle testing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it, and I still don't know how to explain it. So please, 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 can you share it with our audience?
Okay, so I guess the way I would explain it would be, if we're looking at a particular issue, let's say, I'll keep it really simple, like an issue with your frontal cortex, which we'll talk about anyway. So the frontal cortex is a part of the brain that actually, let's make it even easier. We'll use adrenal function, right, which is something we've spoken about a lot. When we use the muscle test to assess these things, so the muscle test is a little bit of a way to assess neurology, right? So we can use it as a way to stress out different neural pathways. Because when I'm testing the muscle, we're not looking for strength changes or to see how powerful you can push. There's a specific feedback loop, and I won't get into it, but there's a specific feedback loop that basically causes the muscle to activate. So, if you were to like lean over and pick up the pen off the floor, you don't actively think about contracting all the muscles required to do that movement. It just kind of happens, it's natural. And that's the brain kind of firing off those sequences to do that. So when we muscle test, we're essentially assessing those patterns. We're testing, does the muscle contract in those ways to work? So the thing is, there's lots of different things that can impact those neural pathways. So it can be as simple as muscle strains, nerve root impingements, and then we get into the more kinesiology side of things, where it can be nutritional changes. Because anything can alter neural function. So anything in your brain. So we know stress changes can affect your brain. We know food changes can affect your brain. We know exposure to toxins, viruses, all these things can affect it. So there is an impact that there is a way where the neurology can be affected by those things, and using muscle testing, we can assess if they're impacting any of these pathways. So when we say funny things like, oh, it's an adrenal issue, and you're like, but it's my back that's sore, we know there's muscle links with adrenal function. We know the neural pathways associated with it. So then we just go on and stress out those areas and assess the muscle changes to find out if it's an issue or not. And through that, we kind of create different patterns. So you might say sometimes, is it an adrenal issue, or am I just wound up, or is it a fatigue issue? Because they all present in a very similar way, that you might be feeling anxious or tired or can't concentrate. But then we go, all right, which parts of the brain are the issue? Is the issue by looking at these pathways. And the muscle test is a great way to kind of test it live. You know what I mean? It's like challenge and assess. And you combine what you know about what the pathways do versus, so what specific challenge you're making, so you know what question you're asking, basically. So, and then where the chiro part comes in is chiropractic literally means manually correcting people. So what most people associate with chiropractic is manual manipulation, so like neck cracking or lower back adjustments. But it's the same sort of thing. We make corrections, but we're more so aiming at what's causing these muscle changes, and we correct that. Whether does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So I have questions, and I'm saying this because not everyone understands I am very familiar with your terminology. But can you explain what adrenals are for people who don't know? And when you say stress it out, like, or you're using it to stress it out to see what's coming up, what does that mean? Are we going in the boxing ring for that? Like, how are you
Yeah.
stressing this out? So, like, can you just delve in a little bit more about
Yeah,
that?
good point. No, good point. So what's it, like a simple brain challenge might be, okay, so when we look at balance testing, so sometimes from getting your brain working right, your balance centers play a big role. So there's lots of ways to challenge them. So to stress it out, we might go, I need you to stand on this foam mat. So we're challenging it. We're kind of asking it to do something that might be difficult, because it's like in normal circumstances, the brain might say, I'm fine. So while you're standing there with your feet where they are and your eyes open, your brain might go, I'm okay like this. But the minute we get you to stand there on a mat with your eyes closed, the brain starts showing signs that it might not be coping. And these are the kind of stresses we try use to pull out information, to find out, okay, how do we start correcting these things? Because the big thing with the muscle test is, if you can't find a way to challenge it, like the balance test stuff, or what else? Another example, like other neuro tests, like who do the finger tapping, or getting your eyes to follow specific directions, or forcing pupils to contract. We're just kind of going, hey, I'm just stressing the brain out a little bit, asking it a question, and see if it copes. And then from there, you can kind of work out, all right, well, it's not that part of the brain, they're fine. This one's fine, and this one isn't. And then we delve into that.
A perfect example of that was I remember one time being in the clinic and
Yeah.
you said to me, close your eyes, and then I want you to march on the spot. And I
Yes.
honestly thought that I was marching on the spot. And then when I opened my eyes, I had walked completely towards you.
I remember.
I didn't even feel like I was walking. I felt like I was just standing in the one spot. So that's a great example of how your brain might be stressed out, but your conscious brain has no idea that that's what's happening. Now, for the adrenals part, what is an adrenal? What does that look like?
So adrenal glands, they're little glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and essentially what they do is they produce hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, so stress hormones. And they're like soldiers; they just get told what to do. So, if an easy example, there's essentially involved in stress, and stress can be things from going to the gym, having worries, weather changes, gut problems like getting a bug or whatever. So anytime the brain needs to adapt to what's coming up, we stress. So stress isn't just anxiety and emotional side of things, but we can use that. So what basically happens is, if we have a stress response, let's say you see a scary dog chasing you, straight away your brain tries to siphon whether this is worth stressing about or not. Firstly, so it might go, oh, I can see the owner. I'm standing on an elevation, I'm inside, so nothing to be scared of here. But let's say you're out in the open, your brain decides, oh, this is coming for me and I need to do something. The adrenal glands receive a signal from your amygdala and your hippocampus, those two brain centers, your amygdala and hippocampus, and they go, I need you to release some cortisol for me so I can get a bit more wound up, or get more energy to the muscles, or be more on and alert to get away. Right? So that's where you get that buzz. And that's why after, let's say you've gotten away, you're still kind of breathing really fast, you're on edge, you're tense, and then after maybe 30 minutes or so, you're calm again, because that hormone's now cleared out of the system, or your body's dealt with it and basically told it to stop. So that's what the gland does. And just commonly what happens with a lot of people is we fatigue it through using it too much, whether it's not sleeping enough, because that's the other thing with these glands is anything we do with our nervous system, we need to recover. And sleep's mainly the way to do it. So if there's either not enough sleep or too much going on, which we've discussed a lot, it falls out of balance, and that gland starts essentially fatiguing. Or that those areas go, I can't keep up. The brain gets tired. I can't produce as much for you. So you start noticing things like I'm waking up unrefreshed. I'm lacking in energy throughout the day, in the sense that I'm just not recovering. If I do something, I have to rest after it. It's like your batteries are going flat.
So I'd love to just jump in here for a second.
Yep.
So I originally came to you, obviously with my angel boy, but I was having problems myself. And I want to touch on this because I think it's really important for women to understand that this is something that kinesiology and functional neurology, and no doubt there's chiropractics in there as well, but that really served what was going on. So essentially, like, let's just go back, 2 years ago, probably maybe more like 3, I was literally too much information. So if you're not comfortable with talking about periods, maybe you want to like turn this off. But essentially, I was having a bleed, and then 2 weeks later having another full bleed, and then 2 weeks later having another full bleed, and I was like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die because I'm going to hemorrhage and I'm going to be dead. And I was like, I don't know what this means. I felt I was way too young for perimenopause because it had come in before I was 40, so it was in my like late 30s.
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel like it was perimenopause. And so when I come in to see you, you're like, oh yeah, take this and do that and blah blah blah, and straight away. And I was like, what kind of magic is this?
What's this
like what kind of magic is it? Because it really got me regulated. And there's been times where I have been this happened actually last Christmas. I had gone to Queensland and I had forgotten to take my drops, right?
Yep.
And obviously my hormones were getting out of whack, and I didn't have my drops with me, and I could just feel the anxiety, Rob. Like it was next level. Like I couldn't swim. I was panicked. I was worried. I couldn't eat. I just felt so not myself. And then as it happened, my mother-in-law had come up and she brought me the drops. And as soon as like 3 days in, I'm like, oh, I'm back in. I'm back in where I am. And so many women really struggle because a lot of the women in this community have got huge amounts of stress, huge amounts of stress that they're dealing with on a daily basis. They're not getting enough sleep. Their adrenals are off the charts because they're trying to manage an autistic child that maybe is violent or aggressive or self-harm or isn't going to school or has school can't, or like the list is endless. But this feeling that we have no control, but in fact we have way more control than we think we do. And you're a perfect example of how that's made me specifically feel much more in tune with my body. And when now, because we've been going and seeing you guys for so long, I can tell when I'm off. It's like a very fine-tuned machine. So I'm like, oh, got to have those drops. Just have a little bit of a checkup. And it's like my first aid kit. And I never want to leave my first aid kit at home if we're going, because I just that's not an option, right? So that's something that I'd love you to speak on a little bit more.
Yeah. No, so because that was the big issue with with your little one. We that was the big start. We worked on him. We made a few changes. But then we could see from everything you've been through, you've really suffered from it all, with where your brain was at, with where your neurology was at, and basically when you brought up these things, we go through the history, we ask those questions, and we quickly found it sounds like it is a stress issue. And there's loads of things that can drive it. So if we stick from an adrenal perspective and your cycle, something like cortisol heavily affects estrogen. So there's a natural response where if we get an elevation of cortisol, your body will naturally elevate estrogen. And one of the main reasons to elevate it is not necessarily impact your cycle, but estrogen helps alert your brain, specific centers, specifically your amygdala, so your emotional centers. So it keeps them more alert. So if you're in a stress mode and worrying about what's going on next, how's he coping? What do I do next? How are things going to be for the future? How do we help? That emotional center needs to keep bringing up those questions. So in order to protect you, your family, that's what your amygdala is doing. Like it keeps putting its hand up and going, hey, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And a lot of your brain filters that. But when your brain thinks it's in a situation where it needs to work harder to protect, to save your life, to look after things, it needs to be on high alert. And estrogen particularly elevates amygdala function. And that's fine. That's as a normal reaction. But when we have too much of this stress going on, we produce too much cortisol, so we start fatiguing. But you remember, your body's fatiguing, but your brain's still going, hey, you're making all of this because we're still in a situation where we need to function. So you make all this cortisol, that stimulates the brain. The estrogen stimulation stimulates amygdala function. So anxiety's up. Anxiety's up because of the chronic effect. Because the thing with neurology is once it gets going, it's a little bit like a bushfire, off it goes. And you really need to rein it in. That's why we have to do all that work to slow it down rather than going, hey, you need to calm down and relax. Because in your case, you would have been at the time where it's like a holiday wouldn't have cut it, or just switching off and not caring. It's like we need to go, hey, we need to make the brain cool down. So we throw everything at it. So now, let's say we've calmed that stress effect down. We've improved neural function. The brain works much better. So you were like, I'm less anxious. I'm clearer. I can concentrate better. You've applied everything to make it work well. Hormones don't just go away. You know, that's when the body goes, well, now that we're calmed down, we no longer need this as much as we did. The body goes, I have to find a way to get rid of this. So sometimes you go away on a holiday, and which we'll get into, your diet changes or your sleep pattern changes, which adds a little bit of stress onto the body. Sometimes this dust gets picked up a little bit and estrogen gets produced, but you know the levels may be elevated already because of the chronicness of the previous stuff. And now that small stress to your brain is a big deal. So you make a little bit of stress, which elevates the estrogen a little bit more, but it's already probably high. So now the amygdala is on fire, okay, and it's pumping really hard. And what the herbs we gave you were more focused around those estrogen receptors around the amygdala. So what they're responsible for is helping that amygdala go, hey, get the estrogen off it, kind of like strip it down. So then if estrogen's no longer setting it off, the brain, it calms down again. So that was our big focus in your case, where it's like we need to help regulate these hormones. So as we've gone through over time, your body's balanced it out. So these stress responses are less up and less up each time. But you can see how it still happens when we get into a bit of a stress mode.
Which obviously it bound to happen. There's different things with stress with my work or home life or whatnot. So that there are peaks of stress, and that's just life.
Yeah.
But being able to manage it is a beautiful thing, and something that I really want to continue into going through this perimenopause journey and going in through menopause. You know, and I want to make sure that it's an easy way of going, because I see so many women struggling who, you know, telling me all of these like horror stories about, you know, perimenopause. And I'm like, Rob better help me with this, because I'm not signed up for this.
You're not going there.
Yeah, like no way. Like I want it to be seamless. And I know, you know, you've told me before that there are women out there that suddenly their period just stopped and there was no like, you know, bones aching and headaches and, you know, like not sleeping and all of that stuff. It was just a natural progression, and that's just how it went. And I was like, okay, well, this is the road that I want to be on.
That's the one you want.
I definitely want to be on that one.
Yeah.
If you can we just go through a little bit around what you did with my son in terms of when we came to see you, and what did that look like from beginning to end, and what did the changes that we saw?
All right. Well, so when we assessed him, because we go through the same neural test, we go, all right, what's the condition? What symptoms are we having? And based on all these things, we start thinking, all right, these are the parts of the brain that need the help. Okay, so the frontal cortex was a big one. Okay, your frontal cortex deals with a lot of there's a lot of the processing. So you know, it does the part like why we say what we say, how we say it, when we say it, why we like things, why we like the smell of grass, or hate the smell of grass. It's like the cockpit of the brain. And when we assessed it, we found, okay, this is where some of the issues lie. How we're going to make it work better. And one of the two big issues we found were had to do with insulin, which seemed to give him the biggest effect, which we'll get on. And there was a bit of excitation stuff through, you know, potentially screen time stuff, adrenal stuff, sleep patterns, all those sort of things. But I guess we've spoken about that. But with the blood sugar stuff, it's a really big deal. And you mentioned it before that it's easy to fix. The rules aren't clear on how to balance it for most people. They just think, you know, they've been taught just eat healthy, eat less sugar, stuff like that. But it's a little bit more than that, and you can control it really perfectly, as you've experienced. So basically, insulin is a hormone that when we eat carbohydrates, it helps us metabolize it. So essentially, you know, it'll take it from the bloodstream once we eat it, and it will help us use it as energy through energy pathways, so we can utilize it. But also what it does, it's also known as a fat storage hormone, where part of this carbohydrate intake, it will store as fat. Now, there's this aspect of it that if we're not metabolizing fat properly, which is important, your brain loves fat. Your frontal cortex loves fat. That's why you hear a lot of people when they go, up their fat intake, start having, I don't know, things like eggs a little bit more, or reducing their carbohydrate, getting that balance better. They all of a sudden can think clearly. Their heads are less foggy. It's much sharper because the frontal cortex loves fat. So eating carbohydrates that affect insulin in a way that we don't cope with will directly impact your fat metabolism. So it will actually cause a lot of issues with your frontals. The other thing with that pathway, it also creates more inflammation. So insulin, because of the way it affects your fat metabolism pathways, it also elevates inflammation through the body. So general stiffness, general aches, but also with the way the brain works. So, it will cause that feeling of brain fog, that pressure, that headaches, that need to sleep in the afternoon. I always ask people, I go, when you have a big bowl of pasta and you want to crash, that's an insulin effect. That's a direct insulin. That's a big spike of that, and the brain just going, oh, tired.
And that's coming up, Rob. It's coming up for Christmas Day.
Coming up for Christmas. Yeah, I always give everyone the hall pass for this one. I go, look, just do whatever you can do. It's going to be too hard to be perfect. But so that's what insulin does, right? So when we get a bit more on I suppose biochemical level, in your brain, they're called neurotransmitters, and they're basically hormones, if you want to call them like that, but they're not really. But they're hormones that regulate brain function. So you hear things like dopamine. Most people hear that. They hear serotonin. These are all neurotransmitters, right? And you get other ones like GABA, which calm things down. So that they all do different jobs. So some elevate, some calm down, some motivate, and whatever. And what insulin has a direct impact on them, big time. So if we elevate insulin too high through carbohydrate stuff, and stress stuff can as well, but we'll get to that. But through carbohydrate stuff, insulin directly lowers dopamine and serotonin. That directly has a negative impact on them, and just causes like excitement and rush. So it causes adrenaline to rush in your brain, which lowers the other ones temporarily. Hence why we crave sugar. We crave it as a stimulation. We crave it to buzz our brains. And often people do it when they're tired, when they can't think. But that's what happens. And we get into those cycles very easily as well, with craving sugars back and forth. So essentially, insulin has a big impact on the way the frontals work. So in your son's case, when we went through it all, one of the biggest effects was we kept that a little bit low to help his brain use fat better, which dramatically impacted his frontals. The minute they were up, like concentration went up, focus went up, attention went up. Speech, that's where we talk from, the frontal cortex. So those started moving a little bit quicker. And I've really found the cool thing in his case when I think he went away for a bit, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's all right, a little bit of sugar." Not you weren't. Everyone else was, "I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine." And he came back, and everyone was like, "Wow, what's happened? He's changed. He's changed." And they're like, "Oh no, let's keep him on the low insulin diet."
It's so funny. So, obviously coming from a Greek background, love is food, right? This is how we show love, is to like, oh, you've got to eat, and you've got to eat a lot, and you've got to eat everything. And, you're rude if you don't eat every single thing on the plate, right? And I remember you saying to me at one point, you're like, oh, we're going to do this experiment. You're going to come off potatoes. I was like, Rob, look me in the eye, mate. I'm Greek. The potatoes are at every meal. Like this is a stock standard. And he's like, you can sub it with sweet potato, but just see how you go. And you made me do it for 2 weeks. And I was like, shut the front door, Rob. It's like a switch went on his brain. The alertness, his ability to follow more instructions, way more eye contact, his ability to just be more present, where before it was like he was there, but he wasn't really there. Like it was harder to connect with him. And I was like, this can't be possible. It can't be possible that you're getting this from potatoes.
It's just potatoes.
It's a percent, it's good for you. I don't understand why this is such and it's really interesting how once you did that, because we did that before we even started on the carbohydrate.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, I'm in. like, what do I need to do? How do I need to follow this? And I want to just share one more story. There are many stories actually, but there's one more story comes to mind, is that the carbohydrate test is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's, you know, in different levels, right? We've got the blue, green, we've got the yellow, the orange, and the red. And in that is, there's different fruits and vegetables in each level. And so we did the blue, green, great. And I was doing it with him, and great, no problems, having a great time. Got onto yellow, great, still having a great time. Went up to orange, and it all turned, everything hit the fan. And I was like, I had a panic. He lost his words, he lost his eye contact, he was retreating back into that very silent world. And I was like, oh my God, something's wrong. And I basically ran in and went into your room, and I burst into tears, and I was like, something's very wrong. And he's like, oh no, that just means that he can only, these are like a sometimes food.
Yep.
And I'm like, what do you mean? Just sometimes. We're not going to have it all the time. And once I knew what his body was responding to and what didn't, everything changed. And I was like, okay, now I know. And it's very good because his body's adapted so beautifully, as has mine, where you can really see what the changes are happening. And okay, I can see he's like that because he's eaten the gingerbread man, or he's had, you know, watermelon, and now, you know, a few minutes, you know, a day later he's having gingerbread man because he's you know, at a school function or a class function or whatever it is, or he's had too much sugar and that's raised his insulin. Now another, I'm going to be done with the stories, but I just need to tell you this one.
Yeah, go.
I remember being at a fete. This was around like probably the yellow stage. And I'd asked my husband to get a chai, and obviously thinking that they were going to have loose leaf chai. Yeah, okay. They had the powdered chai, right? And I didn't even think. So I've taken a swig, and I swear, Rob, it was like someone got a sledgehammer, and it was instantaneous. It wasn't like 10 minutes later. Yeah. As soon as I took the drink, it was like someone with a sledgehammer against my head, and feeling like I was paralytic drunk at the same time. And I was like, whoa, what just happened? And then this realization that how big of an issue sugar and insulin play in our brains and in our guts. And we have no idea. And we have no idea because we're not taught this stuff. We're not taught it in school, and we're not taught by our parents because our parents didn't know this stuff either. And so this is where I looked at vegetables and fruits and be like, well, it's healthy. Like, why is this a bad thing? But it's until you actually realize it, then you can make the changes. So go with that with what you will.
No, but you're right. It's because you always want to try not turn into a diet, because you can have the foods. It's a real simple rule of knowing how to balance it. So you mentioned the colored lists. Is when we eat any carbohydrate, they all just digest at different speeds. So some move quickly through the body and some don't, right? And that governs the insulin release. So for example, chocolate cake will move really quickly. So you need a lot of insulin to regulate it all. Hence the insulin change. And something like an apple won't move as quick, so you get a smaller insulin spike. And our goal is always to go, well, how high can you actually go? Because everyone's a little bit different. Obviously, there's a range where most people sit, but you got on either end the exceptions. So you kind of go through, starting from the bottom, working your way up until you see, okay, we're not coping anymore. And then from there, you can basically draw a line and go, all right, everything under this on a regular basis is going to be okay. And I think the trick with blood sugar stuff is, it is true that small amounts here and there are going to be okay. But again, I don't think the specific rules on how to balance it are taught. So some people might think, oh, look, a little bit of Kit Kat every night is okay because everything else is perfect, or whatever, stuff like that. Whereas it's more of a, this is actually really cool information. It's more of a regularness thing rather than how much you have. So your body, you sit down for Christmas lunch and have everything. You put, 7 potatoes on your plate. You follow that with some cake and then some biscuits after, or whatever, and you have all these things. And as long as it's within a certain time frame, the brain kind of sees it all as one big spike. So in essence, it brushes it off. It goes, oh, that's right, once off, it's okay. You still won't feel great that day, but it moves on. Whereas if you were to have something in those higher ends regularly, when you start creating those spikes on a regular basis, that's when the brain starts going, hey, this is a thing. We're going to go into that non-fat metabolism mode. We're going to go to that mode. We're going to start relying on sugar, because now our insulin levels and our sugar levels are up and down and up and down. And that's how we're going to live. That's why the transition's always so hard, by the way. You know, when you go to the blue-green, you're always like, there are a couple of hard days there, because you're going from up, down sugar to going, I'm going to keep it down here and get the body to use fat more. And that's a transition. So, that up and down spiking is an issue. We adapt to it really quickly if we have the food consistently. So if we reduce the consistencies, still go out and have a big night of food and a huge dinner out, just don't do it every day. And that's how it works. You reduce that, and that's how we make the change.
Is that the same when it comes to alcohol?
Yeah. So well, with food groups, this is actually interesting. So you say alcohol, right? And a lot of people won't go alcohol's a carb, but it can be. So beer's basically essentially carbohydrate, and there's highest red sections. Wine comes from grapes, that's a carbohydrate. Spirits are the only different ones that fall into none of those categories, because they're not a carb or a protein or a fat, they're just something else. So because they're not a carbohydrate, though, I'm not saying to drink it, but they won't cause these spikes. And that's why sometimes when you have, let's say, a beer versus some sort of, I don't know, liqueur like a vodka or something, they'll affect you very differently. Because the beer will have some alcohol in it, obviously, but also create that carbohydrate release, whereas like a vodka, or like just the way it is, won't, and will metabolize, provided we don't have heaps, you'll metabolize that a lot better and might not even notice the effects.
It's difficult. Sorry, say that again.
From a sugar perspective, that is, yeah.
I think for me, this is obviously many moons ago, I was drinking quite a lot to numb the pain. I was drinking because someone would look at him because he was stimming and I wasn't coping. So I'm like, oh, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
And I think my body just became so used to having alcohol all the time that, and I don't know if this is normal or if I'm predisposed to being an alcoholic, who knows? I would wake up the next day and be like, yeah, no problem, no hangover, like, let's go. And I found that even when I was younger, though. But it got to the point, though, that I think that if I had kept going with the booze, that it just would have added so much extra stress and strain on those adrenals, so much extra pressure, and then again, just so many painful periods that I used to get, just doubled over in pain from the sheer amount of sugar that was coming into my body and the insulin spikes versus what does it look like now. And it's so interesting when we can look at it from a data perspective, as opposed to going, are there times, let's be honest, Rob, am I perfect all the time when it comes to this diet? No. And I don't even want to call it a diet, like a way of eating. Are there moments where I will open up that cake drawer that I have in my pantry and get out the choc chips and be like, I'm just try to eat them all because I need a sugar hit.
It's going in today, yes.
But I know, okay, cool. Eat your things, but just know summer's coming around the corner, and that bikini ain't gonna fit the way that you think it's gonna. And also, there's also whatever what's that saying? There's always a reaction to your action, right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be a counter thing that's happening. So I love that we can have more awareness around alcohol, because that is something that a lot of women in this community are dealing with, because A, it's legal, and B, it's such a social thing to do. No one's ever going to knock you, especially not in Australia. They're never going to knock you for having a glass of wine, for God's sakes.
No.
Right? The more, the better. Great, let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So having that feeling where we can normalize not drinking and feeling like it's so much better for our health is going to be a shifting point. And we're already seeing that in the data now. We're seeing it in trends where there are so many more non-drinkers now than there ever have been in the past. And I love that for us, because I think that is something that we really need to be moving towards. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is that as parents, we feel like we're in all the therapies, right? We feel like we're in the speech and the OT and this and that and whatever else. Sometimes we feel like we can get stuck in trying to find the thing that's missing. How do you figure out what's being missed? How do you, as a practitioner, how do you see what's happening and nut out what this child or this mum needs?
Yeah, no, I think when it comes to any health, like even in autistic children or in any brain health stuff, everyone focuses on their own little thing. I think that's why it happens. It's like, I am a speech pathologist, so I will deal with that. Whereas, you look at the neural pathways that regulate your speech. A speech pathologist could also do things that improve. Yeah, we spoke about frontal cortex, which involves that. Could do stuff like that because they are, apart from teaching you how to enunciate words and pronounce these things, but improving your brain in that way will help with that too. So there's no reason why you wouldn't add that. But I think we're also tied in our own little fields. And same for a chiropractor to go, well, I'm here to adjust you. And if that doesn't work, I'm sorry, nothing we can do. Whereas for me, one thing I've tried to move away from, or move towards, is kind of going, well, figure out why this keeps happening. So let's say we did, like in your son's case, I corrected the adrenal stuff. That made a really big effect, but we still started finding, we go, look, we're not calm enough. The brain's still got some level of wind up. We're still finding, frontal function isn't as good as it should be. Why not? So you look deeper and you find these blood sugar issues, and you change them. You know what I mean? And that's why we're at a point where, like, look, I've made a lot of the changes I can. The rest is all about, neural repair, recovery, do all the right things. So I think my biggest thing I've noticed is everyone just focuses on their own field rather than going, I can flow something as simple as I can't enunciate words or speak, to just, I'm just going to practice speaking, rather than going, let's look at all the brain pathways that do it. There was even, this is touching on something else. This is like the psychologist Daniel Amen. He said they're one of the, as a profession, they rarely look at the brain itself. They're always talking about, how you feel, how to process things, emotional stuff. And he started actually looking at the brain and doing these brain scans, and actually found, in alcoholics, in people with sugar addiction, concussion syndromes, and you can actually see the size of the brain in certain sections was actually different. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we narrow it up too much. Everyone fields themselves in this particular area and goes, that's it. Whereas I guess what I try to do is not say we work on everything, but it's kind of like we try to trace back at what else can add to these areas to work on a bit more of a broader picture. Like we spoke about the stress stuff in your case as well. We spoke about there was a handful of different parts of the brain that were an issue. So it wasn't just a matter of like, hey, take this herb, this is good for calming the brain down, and eat better. It was kind of like, well, it was like, yeah, if I remember 4 or 5 different parts of the brain, like, we're working on this first, then we're going to do this section first. And as they came together, the brain started going, I'm functioning much better and I'm calming down. And that's where we make that more permanent change, where you can look after it.
And I also absolutely, I feel like I was peeling a layer, onion, right? You had so many layers that we had to get through in order to get to the point where he was functioning at his best for where he was at that point in time. And I found that, sleep is so much better, right? This kid is yawning, and it's funny because it's hard for us to go to bed now, especially being in summertime, right? It's like still daylight outside. And so my kids actually, they themselves chose them, like the sleep masks. They went out and bought them from Kmart. And I was like, great, let's go. And so he is so adamant about wearing it. I don't personally like them, but he loves them, right? And it's just for him to, and he won't go to bed without it. Oh no, I have to have my sleep mask. But like going to sleep, and he ideally, he wants to be in bed. Like he's going to be 11 this month. And I can't even believe I'm saying that. Oh my God. And so he wants to be in bed by like 8 o'clock, 8:30 at the max. And like sometimes I drag my feet. I know you'll be there going, Nat, get them in bed. They need to sleep. And he'll sleep until 6 or 7 o'clock, and in that really deep sleep. And that's the stuff that we really want. But that was not what it looked like for him through kinder. Through kinder, he was like, this kid was up at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and he was not going to bed until 10:30. And he was like energized and not dysregulated, but just happy.
Mm.
Lord, give me strength. Like, I need some shows to watch. You need to go to bed. Like, get out of my sight. Like, go to sleep. But you know, all of the herbs and everything else, those layers have really assisted in him being able to show up as his better self,
Yep.
right? And this is why I so wanted to do this podcast, because I want parents to know this is a real option. This is an option for them to look at so that they can really support their children in the best way possible. Because although we love speech and OT, yes, there's more things that we can be getting done that can support a child's nervous system, support a child's neurology, so that they can show up the best way possible. Because you can't tell from the outside sometimes. Sometimes you can be like, okay, well, he looks fine. Like, or, you know, is he anxious? I don't know. Like, he looks all right. Or maybe, you know, it's so hard to know. But like doing those tests help with the child's progress. And so I love that. So for a lot of parents who are on this call, who are in our community, they feel frustrated. They feel frustrated because, and I can definitely say I've been there, you know, you're here with your child, but you want to be like over here. You want to be so much further along. What's one thing, I guess, that you could tell them that what they could do to better support their child?
Well, I think an easy change to make would be around this blood sugar stuff. Without going into anything specific, the blood sugar stuff's a big effect there. It's easy to change. And even if you don't get the carbohydrates right because of all the lists, some small changes like, let's just incorporate a little bit more fat into the diet. You know, something like we spoke about, instead of having things like just toast for breakfast, have toast with, you know, avocado, or incorporate eggs into that, you know, because fat's something that's really missing from the way we eat these days. And I'm not saying to have gallons of fat, but we're going to get the balance right. Because if you look at most of our days and you go, what'd you have for breakfast? I had toast. What'd you have for lunch? I had a sandwich. What'd you have for dinner? I had a bowl of pasta. And you think you just had carbs all day. And there's nothing wrong with that, providing it's balanced out with other things, you know? So you look at your simple meals, like your meat and 3 veg. It's like a small amount of carbs, a bit of protein and fat, and that's usually a pretty good balance. But one thing I would really suggest for just general good brain health is to help those blood sugars at an earlier on day. Because even now, this is like, some people are referring to issues like Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. I've heard that thrown around a little bit because it does impact the brain that way. You know, without getting too technical, insulin over a long term, it affects you know, our biggest killers in our modern world, including, you know, diabetes, heart disease, cholesterol issues, Alzheimer's. All those things are something that's thrown around a lot, and it's a really simple fix, you know. So I think getting those things under control, whether you do it perfectly through the list and have absolute control over it, or do something as simple as, let's just have a little bit less carbohydrate in the diet and incorporate a bit of other things and be more conscious of it, I think that'd be one simple thing to take home and give a shot. And if you want to know exactly how to do it, we can always run through it. But yeah.
A lot of the mums that are on this call as well would say, my child only craves carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That's the only thing that they're eating. Like, they're eating like the bread and the biscuits and whatever else. What would you say to them as a beginning step, other than booking in a call with you and you know, doing, like, because that's where the most information is going to come from. But is there one small thing that they can do by themselves before they get to you?
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, I'd start swapping things out as well. So I wouldn't just go ahead and taking things off them. So let's say if they like bread and toast, and that's the only thing they'll get down, you just swap it with another bread that's, like, we'll call it a low GI bread, like things we've spoken about, like with the Bergen breads or the sourdough rise. You get a better option of bread that doesn't spike the sugars as much, and you start swapping things out, because one of the reasons is they want the carbohydrates, not because it's tasty, but because it's just stimulating their brain. The brain tells them it's yummy because it gives them a kick. That's why they want it so badly, and they react often poorly when they don't get it. Because it's not that they're hungry, they want to be buzzed. It's like no different to, you know, someone who wants their alcohol, or someone who wants to, you know, have a drug. because they're addicted to it. The same sugar is just the same. So I tell parents to swap things out. So when we spoke about the potatoes, instead of sweet, normal white potato, you can have the charisma. Still have potato, you can have this one that will spike it less, and they'll start initiating the change. So I don't think dramatic shifts are any good apart from causing big stresses. I think swapping things out for better options first, because they won't really know what's happening, and you'll see the change anyway. Because you'll see within 3 days things will calm down, they'll be a little bit better, and all of a sudden you can offer them other options because they're not just after a sugar hit. So swapping them out, but knowing what to swap out, that's the hard thing. But this information you can look online. You can look, type in like a lower GI option for potatoes, lower GI option for rices, and you type all those things in, you can just give it a shot.
Yeah, definitely. So we used a lot of the spelt bread
Yep.
that we used to use a lot of when at the beginning, and he just loved it and if you were to eat it, you wouldn't know the difference between that and the bread that you bought from the supermarket. Like, honest, swear to God, like it tastes exactly the same, and the ingredients are super clean. So I love when I get so excited now, Rob, where I will find a new product. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's clean ingredients. Like, because it's a rarity these days to find something that has clean ingredients. Like, everything's got fillers and numbers and additives and preservatives. And I often say to my clients and to my friends that, like, if I look at the back of a packet and it's got numbers on it, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm putting that baby back. Like, and
Yeah.
I've said to my daughter as well, like, she at one point, we were at her birthday party. She's like, I really want what is it? Oreos. I really want Oreos, Mum. I'm like, you're not eating Oreos. I'll make you some Oreos. They will taste way better than that crap.
Yes, I love that.
Oh my God. And granted, look, not everyone's going to be in the position to be in the kitchen as much as I do, but just like, there is nothing good in Oreos, right? And so I made them. Did they look like Oreos? They did not look like Oreos. Did they taste way better than Oreos? Yes, they did. They tasted so much better. But, it's just experimenting, trying, seeing what's going on. And it's not until you can sort of see the different things that are available to you that you can be like, oh, I'm going to try that. And then you try it, you see it. If it works, great. And if it doesn't, okay, well, let's move on to a different bread, a different rice, a different whatever. Yep. For the parent, before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, what's something that you would tell a parent of or a mum or a dad who has an autistic child, who's raising an autistic child, and they feel like they are neck deep in it, they are overwhelmed, they, maybe the child is, has a specific diet that is very limited. What are you telling them on how to move forward? What is your piece of advice that you would give to them to see that there's some sort of light at the end of the tunnel?
It's a good question. Because obviously, you can't put yourself in the shoes, of a parent going through these things with all their stresses, everything they worry about for the future, for now, for anything that, everyone's got their issues and their deep concerns about it. But I think doing things like what you're doing, finding access to people that have similar issues, who have had success with different changes, to almost, you want to get on a mission a little bit, because at the beginning it's like, I'm lost, I've just received this news, I don't know how to take it at all, and you can really easily go down a negative hole going, well, it's upset me, I'm upset about it, and I give up. But I think finding people that have gone through the journey, have had some successes, and listen to what they have to say, because like you said, there's no big global answer. There's just ways to improve, to help, to forward things, and they're always in like a small little business, or one person does it in their unique way, or what I mean. It's not like everyone does this. It's fine. Just go to your local chiro or your local one, and they'll just do it for you. Everyone works a little bit differently. So I think it's you listen, you go, whether it's on a forum or a friend or these epic podcasts, it's you listen to that and you give it a try. Because once you have a little bit of guidance or a little bit of a journey, have a little or some level of plan to go, hey, this is forward moving, I've got something tangible I can work with or do, you straight away, as a parent, I think you start feeling better, because I think that helplessness of going, I can't help, to now go, I can offer something. that's going to benefit them. I think that's important, and I think you're only going to find that through, like I said, great podcasts like these, where the information's just, here you go, give it a go, try it, don't like it, do something else. Everyone's a little bit different. I think that's what will be good.
I think the thing for me, having gone through everything with you, is that you allowed me to take some of the power back, right? Yep. For a parent, when we feel so helpless and so hopeless that we don't have the tools or the strategies to be able to help our child, you handed me back the power and said, hey, we can actually work on this. This is the power that we're going to work back on. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to improve it. And come and talk to me after you've finished going through these 7 steps, whatever it is, so that you can come back and say, okay, these are the things that I was able to see. Because when you're in that state of powerlessness, it feels like the world is against you. It feels like nothing you do is right, and that as a parent, you're always getting it wrong. And I could say that as a parent of an autistic child, that is so much further from the truth than it could be. Like, we have so much in ourselves as mums in particular, who are generally the primary caregivers. We have so much in us to be able to share with our child, to be able to guide, encourage, make changes for our children. But we won't know that until we see something like this, until we find you, until we know who to look for. We won't know how to make those changes. So know that you don't have to stay in that powerless position. Know that you don't have to be in a state where, well, this is what it is, and I'm just going to, like, hands up and be like, well, it is what it is. Yeah. I've got a question from someone who's on live. Can you please share your thoughts on dairy?
Okay. That's a whole another thing. Yeah. Dairy is a food that a lot of people seem to have issues basically breaking down in their gut. Okay. And what commonly happens with these things is if we don't have enough enzymes in the gut to break these foods down, or the inability to digest them properly, that something needs to be done with these foods, and it tends to cause a significant immune reaction. Like you see people, they eat dairy and they have to go to the toilet straight away, right? That's obviously the extreme end of not being able to digest these things. But then you got like in between levels where your immune system behaves strangely to these foods, which cause a reaction. So these reactions can affect the way your brain works. So one thing we like to talk about a lot is your blood-brain barrier. And when you get significant immune shifts to these foods, because the gut won't break it down properly, the blood-brain barrier doesn't work as good. So it can't filter the brain properly of toxins in the air, in your food, or whatever. So a lot of people with brain fog tend to have sensitivities to these issues. So, but the barrier also protects from everything, like anything you're exposed to, and essentially keeps the rubbish out and it tries to get the good stuff in. So dairy, alongside with things like gluten as well, anything that can potentially be a food sensitive. And I'm not saying everyone has it, and everyone's got their different ranges, but if you notice your child, for example, you have them dairy and they're not themselves, they get constipated, they start acting up, they just want to sleep all the time on these foods, they get funny rashes after them, they're sensitive to some level, and it's best to either reduce it or at least do a trial where you get rid of it and see what happens. And then I get people to kind of come off it for a couple of weeks, let things calm down. Usually takes a bit more, maybe a few weeks, let things calm down, and then reintroduce it. And if reintroduce it doesn't do much, it means great. Small amounts are usually okay. But if reintroduce it just re-triggers everything, I think you found yourself basically a decent sensitivity to it, and you probably better not having it.
Yeah, I am not a big fan of dairy because I think it's been affecting me since I was quite young. That's just me, and I feel like my kids are the same. Like, yeah, a little bit okay, but I liken everything, like it's like a bucket, right? You fill it up, it's all good until it tips over, and now all of a sudden Nat looks like she's 9 months pregnant, and it's not looking good.
Yeah, you crossed the line.
You crossed the line. You are so welcome. And okay, so I know I'm very mindful of your time, so can you just tell everyone where they can find you and how they can book an appointment potentially?
Okay, so we're Spinewise. We're in Maidstone. The site is just spinewise.com.au. You can book via phone call. You can book online. So if you just call the clinic up, I'm sure someone will be happy to help out and get it all booked in, as you know. But you can also book appointments online as well. So if you just go to the Spinewise website, which again, spinewise.com.au, you'll all be there. You can follow those steps and get a time.
Easy. And so for people who have no idea where the heck Maidstone is, it's next to High Point. So
yeah, good point. It's a very
Yeah.
small suburb, isn't it? It's like I think it's the size of a block almost. It's next to High Point, near Sunshine, next to Sunshine, in that kind of area. But yeah, near High Point, that's the best one. High Point,
Yeah.
behind it pretty much.
It's it. Because otherwise people don't know where the heck Maidstone is. Rob, thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate you coming to speak with me because I know how busy you are and I know how hectic work can be. I appreciate you and thank you for all of your good work.
No, you're very welcome. This has been really nice. I really love what you're doing with this podcast. I think it's super cool.
Thank you so much. Awesome. I'll talk to you soon, Rob.
Talk to you soon. See you later. Bye.